Hello everyone, I believe everybody can hear me. Okay, so we're about to start. I'm just trying to test out if some persons can hear me. Okay, so if you can hear me, just drop a post on the comment section. Let me know that I'm live. Okay, guys. So first off, my name is Solomon Eseme, and I'll be your host for today. And I'm also going to be taking the topic Introduction to Backend Development. Okay, so let me just give you guys a brief introduction to what all this is all about. Okay, so this is actually backend community. It's basically a place where like minds come together to share ideas and grow together. All right, so this is our first weekly live stream, and then in the next week we'll be having someone else to talk about some specific topic on backend development. Okay, so with that said, let's move further. So I'm just going to try to share this screen to be larger, and that's going to take some time here. Okay. Hello, guys. Can everybody hear me? Hi, guys. Hi, guys. Hello, everyone. Okay, please indicate in the comment section if you can hear me now, please. Hello, everybody. I think I'm going to start over again because You guys were not hearing me. I'm sorry for that. I didn't know that my mic wasn't turned on. I apologize for that. Okay, guys. Welcome back. Okay, so welcome to Backend Community Weekly live stream. Basically, this is just a live stream for our community. It's going to be a weekly thing, basically, and we are going to start by trying to get other backend developers to come speak to us about a specific topic, and then try to help us improve more in our backend journey, and also try to help us um, get into the world class standard. Okay, so it's going to be a weekly thing. All right, so I'll be taking the introduction to backend development today, and my name is Solomon Eseme. I'm a software engineer at Care. I also love writing, so I'm writing with I'm writing at Log Records, Rocket, and Vue.js developers. Okay, so you can reach me with Capacity Guru as my social media. All right, so before we actually move on, let me talk a little about what the backend community is all about. All right, just a brief tips before we move on. So it's basically a community, just like every other one. We have the GDG, we have the Flutter, and all of that. So it's basically that kind of a community, but at this time, it is dedicated to only backend developers. All right. Okay, so at the end of this section, I'm going to drop a link so that you guys can go through the mission, the vision, and all of that about this particular backend development community. Okay, so if you look also in the slide, you will see um, the links to our different social media platforms that you can connect with. Okay, and YouTube is also there, which is the one that you guys are actually using right now. So if you've not subscribed, I want you guys to click on the subscribe button and the notification icon for notification anytime we drop any new video, because it's going to be a weekly live stream. Okay. All right. So what is backend development? Now, this is a question in our minds, and if you are a beginner, you might probably be asking this for a long time now. So backend development is just a term that is being given to behind the scene activities, right? So anything that you do that the user doesn't actually see, all right, and the activities that happen anytime you or somebody else visits your website, and these activities happen but do not see it. Okay, like for example, if a user tries to purchase an item in your application or in your web app, right? And then the user clicks on the application on the user clicks on the product, add it into the cart, and then tries to make payment. Now, these different processes basically happens at the back end. Okay, but the front end is just the guy that presents it nicely. Okay, so that was just a brief example of what the backend is all about. Now, what does these backend developers focus on? What do they actually do? Now, basically, it's all about manipulating data. Okay, so somebody trying to purchase a product, that is already a data. So this data is going to be stored somewhere. This product is going to be stored somewhere, and that is databases. Now, what language are we going to use to basically allow the users to click and the request is being sent to us for us to manipulate? So basically, that's any scripting language at all. Okay, so I'm going to list out the things that a backend developer basically should know. All right. Now I'm going to talk about the beginning part of it and also the advanced part of the things that the backend developer should know. Now the first thing is servers. All right. So we have different names of backend development. We have the one that is called server-side development. Okay, so the reason for that is simply because we deal a lot with servers. Okay, so you need to know the different servers that are available. You need to also learn how to manipulate these servers. All right. So I brought out some things here that you can learn as a beginner and some that you can learn as an expert. Okay. So we have different types of server. We have the Apache, we have the Nginx, and we have the Microsoft's different type of servers. All right. So I think the one that is popular is the Apache, and Nginx is also popular now because of the automatic load balancing. Okay, so as a beginner, you need to also identify these different types of servers. You need to know the different types, like static and dynamic servers, which one is basically suitable for the application that you're trying to create. Okay, and then you need to know the different types of communication protocols that we have. So the popular one that we know is HTTP and S. Okay, so we have TCP, we have UDP, we have these different communication protocols. So you need to know them and how to basically use it and which one that is going to be more secure for your application. You also need to know about SSL, how to install it in your application and how to automatically update this. Oh, guys, sorry for the break again. Okay, so the next one is load balancing. Okay, so load balancing basically it's for the advanced guy. Okay, so load balancing is just a way for us to distribute our balance them. For example, we could have regions, and if somebody visits our application from, let's say, Europe, provision the Europe server for the person. If somebody visits our website from Nigeria, then we provision Nigeria's server for the person. Okay, so these and more are basically what load balancing is all about. So you need to know it because it can be very crucial in scaling your applications. Okay, so you need to also learn about message queues. I think the most popular one is RabbitMQ. So you need to know this because most of the time you'll be writing microservices and you need a way to communicate between these services. Okay, but communicate with them faster. Okay, so message queues can help you with such kind of communications. There are more to learn about servers, but I think these ones are what a core backend developer should actually know. Okay, so the interesting part here is as a backend developer, there are several things you need to learn, but one of them, like I mentioned, is databases. You need to know about databases strongly. Familiar with schemas, which are basically tables in applications and databases. But what about indexes? What about views? Okay, procedures and treatments. All right, so as a back things that you need to improve in your career. So not just knowing schemas and some SQL. I know there are different ORMs that can help you with SQL now, but indexes are very, very important for us to know. The reason for that is because let's assume we have 2 million records in our database and we want to access them, or a front end request these records to be retrieved and displayed in their front page. You know, so for us to fetch these records is going to consume time. So indexes can actually help us speed up this process. All right. So that's why we need to know database optimization skills. Okay, so this can be vendor specific. Say, for example, you are dealing with MySQL. So MySQL has different ways you can optimize the database. And then Oracle also has different ways you can optimize the database. So you need to know. Okay, so another thing, you need to have a wide knowledge itself. So it is okay to just know MySQL, which is a vendor, but if you know the SQL language, that is a structured query language, it will be very easy for you to adapt to different types of databases. All right. Okay, so we move down to the operating system. If you look at it, I have Windows, I have Linux, and I have Mac OS. Now, I'm going to recommend Linux. I don't know why, but the reason for that is because almost all the servers I have been dealing with in terms of deployment, they are all on Linux. Okay, so I would recommend you learn Linux, even if you are going to be making use of Mac OS or Windows. At least have basic knowledge of the terminals. Okay, so that said, now there are things you need to learn in any operating system that you're making use of. All right. So number one, you need to know about memory management. Okay. So if you are developing an application for 500,000 members, let's say that's your estimate, what amount of memory are you going to assign to that CPU? Or what amount of memory are you going to assign to the disk? All right. So you need to know this. And also, garbage collection is something that is built into programming languages. Yes, I know. But if you study memory management very well, you'll be able to at least know how garbage collection works. Okay, so we have processes and process management. Okay, so for those guys that are dealing with Node.js, okay, so processes and process management is already built in, like it's one of the most important thing in Node.js. But there's no harm for you to know how it works. All right. And then we have threads and concurrencies. All right. So threads basically means if you want to run different, like one application, but this application is doing two things at the same time. Say, for example, you are trying to download a very large file and you don't want your system to, you don't want your application to get stuck there, and you want the users to actually interact with the application while the file is downloading. So you can basically send that to a thread, and it will go on while the user can also interact with the application. There are more to threads, there are more to concurrencies and processes, all right? So this is just a brief overview of the things that you need to know as a backend developer in terms of operating system. So you also need to know scheduling. Now we talk about Scrum jobs. Most of us have used that before. So scheduling is very important. Let's say, for example, every morning you want to send happy birthday to the persons in your application that use that their date of birth is today. All right. So you can use scheduling for that, or cron jobs, as you guys can call it. All right. So we have virtualization. Okay, and then we have cloud computing. So cloud computing is very, very important as of this time, because almost every application now runs in the cloud. So we have the SaaS, we have the PaaS, and then we have the infrastructure as a service. Okay, so have just a general knowledge of cloud computing for the beginners, but for intermediate, you need to go in depth into cloud computing so that you can deploy your application faster. And then we talk about interprocess communication. So this is already something that if you learn processes and process management, you'll be able to talk about interprocess communication. So this is basically a form of communication that happens between two processes or different processes in your application. All right. So you also need to learn about input and output management and distributed file system. So what about if your file is stored in a server somewhere in the US? How do you access it faster? All right. So you need to know about these distributed file systems. Now, at the end of this section, I'm going to drop this link. It's not clear enough, so I'm going to drop this link for you guys to study about these concepts. Okay, so this is the fun part. Now, in terms of software stack, you can choose any programming language of your choice. You can choose JavaScript for your backend. You can choose PHP. You can choose Java or C Sharp, anyone that best suits you. But what should you learn in these languages? All right. When I first started out, I was confused about the things to learn. All right. So until I created out a schema for myself, and I'm going to show you guys that right here. So the first thing is you need to learn the syntax, actually. The first thing is learning the syntax of the application, sorry, of the language. Get to know the syntax very well. And then you can pick from any of these lists and start learning. Okay, so I will start from section management. It doesn't matter the one that you start with. Okay, so you need to learn section management. Now, if this person is logged in, where do I store his section? How do I delete this section? How do I refresh? And all of that. Okay, you need to learn about authentication, which is very important. Authentication is very important, and authorization. Somebody can log in as a user, and then that person has been authenticated. But if there is no authorization, the person would have access to what the admin only has access to. Okay, so the person can log in as a user and be able to access an admin's information, or can be able to access another user's information. So that's where authorization comes in. So authentication is basically different, and authorization is different. So you need to learn the two of them and how to use them efficiently. Now, another important thing is caching. Now, when we talk about your application being fast and scalable, you need to implement a proper caching mechanism for your application. All right. So there are several caching mechanisms out there. So you need to implement one. Choose the one that best suits your application and implement it. Okay. You also need to look out for the caching engine that you'll be using. Okay. So we have several ones. We have Redix, which I love so much. We have Memcache. Okay. So I personally would recommend Redix. I don't know why, but it's simply because I can use that same engine for login. All right. So you also need to learn APIs and web services. Now, APIs are very important as a backend developer. I'm not saying that that is the only thing that we do, but it's important. Okay. So APIs are basically what the front end guys communicate to. That is how they send requests to us. That is how they send updates to us. That is how they ask us to do whatever they want the backend to do. Okay. So you need to make sure that your API is modern and it follows best practices. Okay, in terms of how you respond, to the request that was sent, how you handle the request, and all of that. So you need to know these different best practices. We are going to look at the demo on how to create a simple API and the different responses that you can send to the front end. You also need to learn how to create web services. Okay, so web services uses API, but it's just like should I say a resources that is online for consumption. Okay, so you build an API and then you host it online for anybody to connect to and get access to your resources. Something like a public API. Okay, so that's what I will describe web services as. Okay, so you also need to study different software architectures. And the most popular one, or the one that I use most of the time, is MVC. So we have different types of software architectures. I'm also going to drop a link for you guys to read about it in one of my articles, right? So we have software design pattern. This is very crucial. You need to learn how to structure your code very well for readability. Now, these design patterns are basically, patterns that different persons have used, tested, and confirmed. So if you are following this pattern, that simply means that anybody that wants to maintain your code that knows this pattern already would easily adapt to your code base. Okay, so the next one is algorithms and data structure. This is scary. This one is scary, like even for me, but it's something that you need to learn, because if you want to respond to requests faster, you need to choose a better algorithm to respond to this request. Okay, so you need to choose a better algorithm, and then you need to know a better data structure to store your data and how to manipulate this data. Okay, so we have structured login. This one is very, very important also because of maintainability. Some persons usually neglect it, but you need to start applying it now. So structured login is talking about storing every information or every activities that is going on in your application, storing them somewhere or storing them on your server. Okay. Now, if somebody tries to log in into your application, you can also log that the person tries to log in. who is the person that tries to log in, you can pass in the ID into the log file. Okay, if somebody tries to hack your application, so you can basically store that in your log files that this person tries a malicious attempt and all of that. So if anything goes wrong, you can basically go to the log files and then read through, see the IDs of the person, see the information of the person, and then you can basically use that to know what happens and how to resolve it. Okay, so there are a few things you should not store in logs. You go, okay, so I'm just going to mention that you shouldn't store passwords in your log files. There are other security things like bank account details and all of that. So you also need to learn about debugging, profiling, and tracing. Okay, so if you're using VS Code, this one is easy to implement. So you just install some of the plugins and they will help you with this one, with debugging, profiling, and tracing. So for PHP, I use Xdebug a lot. That could help me with debugging, profiling, and tracing also. Okay, so you need to pick one framework. So you notice that I put the framework basically last after you've learned all these different things. Okay, so the reason for that is basically because now the framework does all these other ones for you. So you basically use what is already created and it makes your project faster. Okay, it's good, but how about you just know how it works? Know how it is being done and all of that. Okay, so that's why I basically have to put that below other things. Okay, so in PHP, you could learn a framework like Laravel. In Node.js, I use Adonis.js a lot. You can learn that, or you can learn Express.js, right? Okay, so in terms of deployment, deployment is basically taken care of by these new guys, the DevOps guys, but it is very, very important that you know how to deploy your applications. All right. So in some companies, this is a different role for somebody else, but in some companies, it is your role, it is your responsibility. So you need to know how to build your application, you need to know how to deploy it to live server, you need to learn how to deploy it to staging and all of that. Okay, so software testing is very, very important. Okay, so I'm going to dedicate an entire week for just software testing. I'm going to talk about different types of software testing that we have. We have the unit test, we have the functional, we have the integration and all of that. So I'm going to dedicate a whole week for this topic. But one thing you need to know as a backend developer is that unit testing is your responsibility. You need to write unit testing. Okay, so that said, let's move down. Now, things you need to consider as a backend developer. Okay, anytime you are writing any backend service, the first thing you need to look at is scalability. So the scalability talks about in plain English, the number of requests that may be coming into your application, how would the application respond to that? If the application grows to 1,000, 5,000, 1,000,000, is the application going to break, or is the application going to fail, or is the application going to recover? So this is scalability. Now, we talk about security. This is very important in any application. Okay, so we have security frameworks that you can follow. I basically follow the OWASP top 10. I'm going to also drop the link for that. So you can follow that. That lists out top 10 security tips that you can implement in your application. Okay, so you need to also look at robustness. What if your application fails along the way? Okay, will the user see a blank page, or will the user see a nicely formatted error message? All right. So number 4, we talk about readability. So readability, we've already discussed that when we looked at the different design patterns and architectures that you can use. So that will enforce readability and make sure that you have proper namings. All right. So we have performance orientation. So how fast is your application able to respond to a request? Okay, so this is where caching comes into play, and you choosing the different and the best caching mechanism that suits that application. All right, so we talk about maintainability. Okay, so make sure that you know that anytime you are writing an application, that application is going to be maintained by either you or somebody else. So you should basically write the application so that it is maintainable. Okay, So move down to the roles of a backend developer. Okay, so this can be very confusing. All right. Now we have DevOps guys, and then we have backend developers. Now, what is the role of a backend developer specifically? Okay. Now, the first thing you need to look at is what does this backend guy, what do they do, first of all? Now, the whole thing that the backend developer does is data. Anyhow you want to manipulate the data, anyhow you want to build the logic that manipulates this data, that is what you do first of all, before added functionalities that could be added for you. Now, first of all, you need to understand the goal of the software. Okay. Now, when the management comes forth that they want to build this particular software, you need to have a proper meeting set up. You need to also discuss the software in details. This is a phase in software development that is called planning. You need to plan it out within yourself and within the team, and then come up with an effective solution. This is your job actually, because you are the guy that is going to communicate to the front end. You are also the guy that will communicate to the mobile guy. So you need to understand the software before you start building. So the next one is you need to compile and analyze the data. Now the management can say that this software is going to process this data, is going to process that data, and it's going to bring out this result for our users. So you need to also look at the data, you know, try to understand the best approach to follow, try to analyze the data, trying to look at, what database vendor should we use for this type of application. Okay, and then you need to code out the solutions, all right? And then you also need to identify areas where we need to improve, or where the software needs to improve. Okay, so the next one is communication, which is collaborating with front end developers. So as a back end developer, it needs to have this skill of communication. All right. So because the reason for this is because you are basically talking to the front end guys through your endpoints. Okay. And then you're also talking to the mobile guys through your endpoints. You're also talking to the management, okay, through maybe meetings, trying to understand the software and all of that. Okay, so you need to have a good communication skill. Okay, so you also need to design the model of the application. So the front end guys is basically looking up to you to come up with the model of the application. That's architecture. Okay, so how the software is going to work, right? How the software is going to work, what database are we going to use, how the endpoints are going to, be represented, and all of that. So this is your job actually. So you need to have communication skills to be able to communicate with these different persons. All right. So the next one is data manipulations. So this is something that you have to do. You cannot escape it. You have to manipulate data. So sometimes I try to compare backend guys with data scientists, but it's actually a wrong comparison, sure, but I'm just trying to compare them for myself. All right. So the reason for that is because we deal with this data and then we build logic that the interfaces are going to interact with. What I mean by the interface, the front end guys are going to interact with. Okay. And then we basically restrict access to this data. Who is authorized to this? Who has access to this data? Who doesn't have access to this data? Okay, so that's your job to decide what happens to the data in your database. Okay, so the next one is developing and managing and working with external APIs. Okay, so at this point in programming, we have several web services. We have several external APIs. So you need a way to interact with them efficiently. Now, the reason why I said efficiently is because of this. Now, let's assume you're making use of PayStack API, and along the way, PayStack service went down. You know, so at that point, your user will not be able to make payment, right? So you need a way to manage these external resources efficiently, such that if anyone goes down, you can be able to do what? Just switch to another. So that is where we talked about robustness. You need to be able to switch to another service immediately without your users actually experiencing any downtime. All right. So the last one here is organizing the logic of the system. So everything that has to do with how the system works is your job. You cannot run away from it. So that's the reason why you need to learn proper algorithms. Okay, so the next one, let's move the slide further. Okay, okay, so I think at this point, we'll move down to the demo to look at how to develop a modern API. So what we are going to be focusing on is making use of these things that we've listed here. Now, first of all, we'll look at the scalability part of the application, and then we'll look at the security part, which I think I basically skipped. And then we'll look at the robustness of the application, and then the readability. Okay, so I'm going to make use of these few things and then create an application for you guys. I've already done that, so I'll just walk you guys through how I did it. Okay, so you guys should give me a minute. Let me switch my screen. I'm trying to still learn how to use this StreamYard. Okay. Okay, guys, I hope you guys can see my screen now. Okay, so I have this application that I have already created. I'll just walk you guys through it, and maybe you could learn a few things from it. Now, this is Laravel. Okay, so the ideas here can be implemented in any language. I basically use Laravel because that was the closest to me right now. So you can use it in Node.js or any language of your choice. Now, the first thing you need to look at when you're building an API is, first of all, who is going to make use of this API. All right. So you need to ask yourself this question: who is going to make use of this API? Is it an external API? So, like, is it a web service, or is it an internal API? Like, is it the company that is going to make use of the API? So, in this scenario, this API is going to be used internally. Okay, so assuming that I have the company that is called ticketing system, because that's ticketing system here. So the company is going to make use of this API. So it's an internal API. Okay, so maybe we'll dedicate 1 week for how to create an external API and how to secure it differently. Okay, so first off, let's look at the authentication part of it. So I'm using Laravel Passport. Okay, sorry, this is testing. So I'm using Laravel Passport. I've already installed that. You can read that up. Okay, so this is the sign up process. Now, nothing fancy. It's a normal way you write your sign up. But if you notice, I'm caching every user that has already signed up. Okay, so the reason why I'm doing this is because of performance. Okay. Okay, I just know someone said that the screen is not clear. Let me try to fix that. Oh God, help me with StreamYard though. I don't know how to use this. Ouch. Okay, I just hope the screen is clear now. Okay, so one thing you need to look at is not the way I handle the registration system. This is the normal way Laravel does it. Okay, so but one thing you need to look at is now if the user has successfully registered. Okay, so we are caching the user, right? So the reason why we are caching that is for the performance aspect of the application. Okay, so if the user tries to log in again, okay, so the user would not be accessed from the database. So the information about the user would not be coming from the database, right? It will be coming from this cache, and that will make it faster. Okay, so the cache, you can use any caching mechanism, like I said before. Right now, I am basically using. Let me look at that again just to demonstrate. I'm using file system, and which is slow actually, it's very slow. So you can use Redis or you can use Memcache. But I'm using file system because I couldn't configure it right now. Okay, so this is one. Make sure that every single operation that happens, you are caching it. Okay, so you could look. The reason why you need to study caching mechanism is so that you understand the things that you can cache. What are the few things that you can cache? Okay, and then the next thing is logging. If you notice, this log is basically structured because here I am saying new user with this ID is created and the user is cached. Okay, so if anybody tries to look for information about this, the person can see it using the ID of the user. Okay, and then here I am sending a normal notification. This doesn't matter. Okay, so here I am structuring my response. One thing about endpoints is that the response should be structured properly or in a well formatted manner. Now, what I'm sending is the message, right? I am also sending the status code, and then I am also sending the information or the user information. That is the data, the name, the email, the password of that particular user. Okay, so that's what this response is sending. Now, but if something happens and the user was not created, okay, so I am going to log another information. This time it's not going to be information like you see here. Something happened, all right? So the backend guy should debug it, okay? So I log this telling the guy that user was not created, something uh, something wrong with the server, something went wrong with the server. Okay, so this time I am not sending the user's information because the user is actually not created, but I am responding with internal server error and 500. Now this is not detailed enough. Okay, now if you want a detailed response, you need to pass in the cause of this error and how to resolve it. Okay, so that would have been done if this API was a public API. Okay, so are you seeing how different it is for us to create an internal API and the response would change because you want more information to be. Your end user actually is not going to be the people visiting your website. It's going to be the clients that basically wants to use your service. Okay, so you need to pass a more detailed information as a response to uh, to the request. Okay, so that's for login, and then for signing up. Sorry for logging in. Okay, sorry if I missed one or two there. For logging in, this is a normal Laravel way of logging in. I just abstracted some things. Okay, but what we need to look at is what happens here. Okay, now I am creating a token, which is a normal thing to do. I am creating a token for the user. Okay, but at this time, I am setting the scope of that user. Now, there are different ways you could do this, but I think because of the system that I'm building right here, this is a preferred method because this particular scope is just these ones. So if you're building a public API, there would be many scopes. So there will be a proper way to structure the scope for readability. Okay, so if the user that is logging in is an admin, I want to give the person this scope. Okay, so when the user is trying to access any particular item or any particular resources on our database or on our server is going to check for the scope. Is this user able to edit? Is this user able to add or delete? If it is not possible, then we are going to send the user a structured message. Okay, so you can notice that I also create scope for the user. So the user can only view our item, they can buy, and they can also join, because this is an event management system. So they can join events. Okay, so after creating that, I am generating the token, and don't mind all these other ones. Okay, so here, okay, I'm just generating insights. So another thing to look out for is I did the structured login again. So I also logged the user that was successfully logged in. And then this is the way I structure the response. Now, this structure is different if you are building a public API. Okay, so because this is an internal API, all right, and I am working with the front end guy directly, I only need to send the user information, the insights for the for the dashboard. Okay, but public API, you don't have to send the insights at that time. And then I'm sending the access token. I'm also sending the bearer type. Okay, I may not have sent this because it is an internal API. So the front end guy should already know the bearer type or the token type. And I'm also sending the expiring date. Okay, so at this point, I'm supposed to also send refresh tokens. Okay, but I didn't. All right, so we have the logout mechanism. So here we basically clear the token, and then we log that this guy has successfully logged out. So everything that happens in our system, we are basically logging it to a file, or we are logging it to a different server. The reason why I said I like Redis is because I can use it as a caching system. I can also use it as a logging system. Okay, so I can configure the two on one engine. But if you use Memcache is just for caching. So if you want to log, you go and look for another engine for that. Okay, so I have a question. Let me respond to that. So the question says, using handling exception, using try and cache, and lodging the error with exception get message function. Okay, so I think this guy is trying to say that I could have used try and cache. Yes, that is correct. I could have used try and cache, and that is the right way to do that, actually. But I feel I just wanted to demonstrate this. Thank you, Yang. I don't know how to pronounce the name right now. Okay, so that's it for the authentication part. Now let's look at event controller. So this is our service now. This is the service that we are basically offering. Now, before anybody can get access to this service, the person might have already been authenticated. If you look at our router here, let me open that part. Okay, so if you look at our routes here, we have these endpoints that does not require authentication, and then we have this one that requires authentication. Okay, now if you look here also, when you're dealing with APIs, there are different things you need to consider, like versioning. Okay, so versioning is very, very crucial to your API. The reason why I will not discuss it in details is because this is not a public API. Okay, so if it is a public API, I would have just taken time to discuss about versioning. There will be a week for creating public APIs, but since it's already here, let's talk about versioning a little. Now, you need to also always specify the version of your API, because as you're building this API right now, you might want to change this system. You might want to introduce new things, you might want to fix bugs and all of that. So your user or your front end will not be waiting for you to basically do the updates. Okay, so that is why on every single URL, as your base URL, you need to also prefix the version that you are dealing with. Okay, so always prefix version to your base URL to let the users know. I'm talking about the front end now, to let the front end guys know that this is version 1. So if there's any version 2, the only thing that they have to do is to update the URL or to update the base URL and put 2 here instead of 1. Okay, so like I said, when we deal with public APIs, I'm going to discuss versioning in details and different best ways to create different versions. Okay, so here, now we have the first uh, um, function here that is called index. Okay, so the reason for this is, let's say you're creating a product management system where a user comes in and see a list of all your products. All right, so you need a way to, for the front end to retrieve that product. All right, so to do that, there will be a method to do that actually. Okay, so you need to also remember that this method or these products would be segmented or will have pagination. Okay, so you also need to check for pagination if the request that is coming to this particular method has what pagination numbers in it. And then you also remember to cache. So one important thing you need to know is caching every single request that is coming out. Okay, so Laravel helps us with pagination already, so that's why you just have this paginate. So first of all, let's not talk about what is happening here because this is language specific, but let's talk about what you could do at this point. Okay, so at this point you could check for pagination. At this point also you could check for different filtering parameters. If the person wants to search for product with so name and all of that, so you can basically check for that. So for you to do that, it's very simple. I'm just going to demonstrate by saying uh, product name, and then you check for the from request. Check if it has that. Okay. If it has, let's call it product name. This is what it's coming in. If it has that, then give me that. If it doesn't, um, get it. Most of the time, it's going to be coming as a query parameter because this is a GET request and doesn't need any post information. So you could pass in empty. Now here, since you've already gotten this, you can then check if there's what product name. Okay, so if there's product name, right? So you can basically retrieve data with product name. Okay, so that could be in a different function entirely. So you can check for several things, but at the end, if there is none of the information, as if there is none of the filters, you can basically just get everything and return it. Okay, I might have a typo here. Okay. Okay, so that said, make sure that you always cache every single request with a proper name. So here I am saying events with this page number and this size. Okay, because the person can change the sizes and the page number, so you want to also cache that so that if the person requests for that again, you will not be able to get it from the database. And I'm also logging here again, and this is how I structured my response. Okay, I am saying that the code is 200 and then the message is successfully retrieved and I'm passing the collections. Okay, so this is how you would do it in any other language, but Laravel has a special feature that is called resources that can help you, do all this. And this is called collections. Sorry, it's called resources. You can basically just pass in the information like this, and it just return the correct information. Okay, so this is how you will do it, but Laravel has this built in. Okay, so if, for example, the event was not able to retrieve, and then you need to also send in a response telling the user that it was not found. So the same goes for uh, every other resources here. Now for storing, you need to also make sure that you validate your input. Now for storing, it is only the admin that can create a new event. So that's why we need to make use of this token can and then pass in what they can do. All right. So we could check this basically when the person is coming in here at the route stage. We could check it, but the reason why I didn't is because it is just here and here. Okay, so if we have different services, we could basically structure our application in a way, or our route in a way, that everything that the admin can do would be in separate group, and everything that users can do would be in a separate group, and then we can then attach the scope to that particular group. Okay, so here, check if the person can basically create a token, and if it's possible, then create the token and make sure that you cache the token, so that anytime the person is trying to access that resources again, it will not be coming from the database, and thereby making the application faster, or making your response faster. Okay, and yeah, so this source code is actually on my GitHub page. I will drop a link to that. Okay, I'm just picking out things that are very, very, very important to talk about here. Okay, so looking at this demo, you notice that there are a few things that we basically capitalize on. Number one is caching, and then number two is lodging, which is very, very important to look at in any application that you're building, because that is what is going to make your application faster and um, fault tolerant. Okay, so yeah, that is basically it. So I will just try to view the application now and look at the I don't know if you guys can see my postman. Let me try to share it again. Oh God, how do I do this? Okay. Okay, so I hope you guys can see my postman now. Okay. All right, so let's try to fetch all events. First of all, I try to do that without logging in. Oh God, I didn't start the server. Let me do that. Okay. All right, so the server is up now. If I try to, let me look at this. Okay, so I think I've already authenticated these guys. Okay, so when I was testing this out, I've already authenticated. And to log out right now is going to take me some time. But basically, if you have not authenticated, it's going to just give you a message here saying 401, not authorized to access this particular event. Okay, and then you have to log in and all of that. Okay, So right now I don't even have any event. Let me see some data. Okay. Okay, guys. So I think there is no data in that particular database, and I did not write any CDA for that. So basically, I've already deployed these, and there's a live server, there's a live database for the application. So let me just show you guys using the web app. So let me try to switch this screen again. Um, okay, so right now you guys can see the live application here. All right. Okay. So we have the events. This is coming from live database that I've hosted. And the application was developed with Vue, so you might notice the activity in them. So this is the data, and this data is basically segmented. There are about 500 um, records on the database for this particular thing. I use it for testing. There are about 500 of them, but it's loading faster. If you look at it, let me try to analyze. Let me try to see the response. Okay, so let me reload it again. Okay, so it happens in about 238 milliseconds. Okay, so it loads about 500 something data from a live database in this time. Okay, so that's pretty fast because of caching. If I don't know if you guys noticed, the first time that I load this, it takes a couple of time, but since I'm refreshing, it's going to be very fast because of what I've already cached the information. So if you can look at it now, it has even reduced to 227. Okay, so let me try to open a brand new page. Can't even remember the login details for this. Oh my god. Let me try to register one. Okay, feel like I'm having a server errors. Oh god. Heroku. Okay, so that's not my fault now. It's Ereku and their problems. I think I need to pay one or two amounts. All right. So, but I've already demonstrated what I want to show you guys. Now, this is basically loading 500 and something records, and it's happening in milliseconds. Okay. So that is faster compared to if you're not using caching at all. Okay, it's going to take a couple of time for the information to be loaded. Okay, so with this, I would say that is a wrap, and I'm going to summarize. The few things you need to take home here as a backend developer is that you need to make sure that your application is scalable. Okay, so let me try to switch this screen again. God, I have a problem switching this screen. Okay, so you need to make sure that your application is scalable. And in terms of security, I did not really implement much security processes because Laravel handles most of them. But in terms of authorization, I've shown you guys how to create different scopes and how to apply them to different endpoints that you want different persons to access. And in terms of robustness, I think I've demonstrated using login, if something happened, or using proper error messaging in terms of the response. If something happens, so the response message should basically correspond to what is happening. Okay, in terms of readability, I've also shown you guys um, about that. In terms of performance, I made use of the cache mechanism to handle how the application can deliver your content faster. Okay, so here, that is a wrap here. And if you guys have any question, I'll be ready to answer anybody. Okay, so while that is on board, let me look at the chat. If I see any question, I will drop an answer. So by next week, we'll be having somebody to talk about a very, very, very important topic. Okay, so I want you guys to subscribe and click on the notification icon so that you can see or you can get a notification when we are about to start the next week stream. So the person uh, is going to talk about a very, very interesting topic. I know I've known this person for a long time. He's a very good backend developer. He's going to take us on some very important topics. So I want you guys to stay tuned while I wait your questions. Thanks, guys.